Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first Franchise 101 session, where we're going to talk about the importance of selecting the right real estate. And who better to have a kind of share more about this than the CEO of Colliers Vietnam, Mr. David Jackson. A quick introduction about him. David is the CEO of Colliers in Vietnam. He has a broad and diverse level of expertise in managing business, capital markets, transactional management, and valuations and advisory. With over 18 years' experience in commercial real estate and management services, he advises a wide range of clients in an international, regional, and local capacity. Since arriving in Vietnam in 2008, David worked with a number of major occupier accounts and has been a primary advisor to large-scale organizations such as REE Corporation and Kumho Asiana, as well as undertaken a variety of roles within Colliers itself. Over to you, David.
Isham, thanks very much for the introduction. I hope everyone can hear me. And I would just like to say what an absolute pleasure to be talking with you today and the people who are here. Just going through this morning, listening to Miss Pivan, Asif, Raj, Ken, John Pemberton as well. Just a really great panels, really good introduction. So without further ado, as Ishan said, I'm David Jackson. I work in property and real estate here in the region. And we deal a lot with retail. And retail is not the most easy industry to talk about sometimes because it's evolving and adapting and changing all the time. And the customer base is more demanding. So it's evolving. And I think that's one of the key things I'd like to talk about in the next 25 minutes. And so for the talk today, I'm just going to present an overview of what's happening in retail in the region, and then followed by what's going on in Vietnam. And then we're going to delve down a little bit deeper for those that are looking at franchising here about what's the key customers, what's the demand, what's the drivers, and followed by obviously real estate and selecting the right real estate. So I thank you in advance for your time. Let's go on this journey together. I'm just going to share my screen now with you in terms of a presentation. So I'm hoping you can all see that. Again, thank you very much for the time. Let's move forward. If I can. Give me 1 second. Okay, so here we go. Thanks for that. Sorry for the technical issues. So I'd like to first talk about, what's happening in global retail in the region. Obviously, we know the big players. Walmart in America has been around for some time, internationally driving products, driving the brands in the region. But then, as you see, number two, Amazon is obviously a kind of semi-recent in the last 20 years, growing into the market and leading in compared of the retail and the outlets. Obviously, looking at convenience is the main driver. People, as was the discussion previously, looking at convenience, 1 hour delivery, 40 minutes delivery time. And as John from Heart Darkness mentioned, Vietnam is very key at this and very quick to delivering consumer expectations. So, how is the retail market changing? So in terms of retail, it is adapting and changing all the time. The traditional model of a department store or shopping center with perfumes on the lower floor, moving up to fashion, moving up to entertainment, is kind of moved on. People are looking at technology. They're looking to reach out to customers more and attract customers more by building up brand recognition and brand loyalty. E-commerce is on the rise rapidly. Which we'll talk about in a minute, but if you look at Vietnam in terms of e-commerce, the government reports say that e-commerce penetration is actually still very low. But in reality, a lot of people using Facebook and the Facebook marketplace, you only need to stand outside an office building and see the amount of deliveries that are happening on a regular basis. It's just the government can't track it. We're looking at automation in store operations. We're looking at people tracking how many consumers they have entering and exiting premises, tracking delivery times. You can simply see this on the rise of Pharma City in Vietnam, for example, that opened up its 1,000th store on Monday this week, and the way it tracks their stock and the way it tracks their delivery, making it more effective. Going on to robotics, logistics, obviously around the world is on the rise. Companies like Amazon are really driving the way and the future in terms of looking at logistics and customer service and the way that they're delivering and the way that they're engaging with customers. On the previous talk, there was also mention about the way that, do people buy in shops anymore? Generally, they go to shops for an experience. They want retail as an experience, and then they'll buy the product online. Omni-channel retailing, for those that don't know, is basically retail that is looking at attracting every touch point with the customer along the supply chain and engaging with customers in what they're doing. You can also see, in terms of collaboration, a lot of people are collaborating, in between brands. A lot of people are sharing to reach the customer basis. So there's lots of things happening globally, and the way that the outlets are going is more of an experience rather than just a shopping destination. It's more looking at engaging the consumer on a general basis. So where are we at with retail in Southeast Asia? Well, the simple fact is that Asian economies are growing 2 to 3 times faster than developed economies. Southeast Asia, the population is rising, the consumer spending is increasing, it's evolving in terms of increased sophistication of product, and with the growth of the economy, growth of the region as a whole, there's rising consumer spending and demand. Now, Indonesia is one of the biggest markets, but with the rise in population with Vietnam, I think this will be overshadowed because Vietnam is growing and going to be very successful in the region. So let's get to the basics. Let's get to what we're really here to talk about, which is Vietnam. Now, simply put, the demand is here. Vietnam has a population on the last census, which was 97 million. I think the next census puts it at about 105 million. That's around about in the region, 10 million people living in Hanoi, 15 million people living in Saigon, which are the 2 main areas. And, the population is 53% around about under 35. A couple of years ago, this was 65% of the population under 35. And urban population is growing at about 36 to 38%, which basically means there'll be more people living in urban areas in the country by 2050. So where we're looking at, it's basically Vietnam is a strong contender for investment when considered alongside other Southeast Asian countries. Thailand has issues with the royal family. Myanmar, Burma has issues with the political stability. China has political issues. Indonesia has religious issues. But when you're looking at Vietnam, you have a very young, very dynamic, very smart, growing population here, very adaptable. It's the way that it's linked in the region is that it's an easy base for goods to come in and come out, and the retail sector reflects these fundamentals in the demographics, the social demographics. Vietnam is basically evolving. It's urbanizing, it's growing its population, it has an expanding middle class, consumer spending is on the rise, and there's consolidation of some of the major players here. You can see this with Vingroup and Masan. joining together. You can see this in the expansion of businesses that are coming in here. And there's an entry of international players, which we'll talk about. Basically, the demand is here. If you look at Starbucks entering the market, that was only in 2011. That was only, about 10 years ago. McDonald's, after that, 2012. There is great demand for international, well-known products and brands. And that's why it's good to be a part of this event today, talking about some of these franchise opportunities that are coming in and how there's the demand pool to be in Vietnam for them. There's also, going alongside it, as Heart of Darkness and John mentioned in the last call, about deliveries and moving on, not just from real estate, food and beverage discussion, but also deliveries and doing that. And I think John mentioned that it's now 25% of his current business in the last call. There's also the rise of social media. As Hao Tran mentioned from Vietjetri, if you don't have a Facebook, you don't exist here. So there's a real need to connect with and get brand identification. So retail in Vietnam, as I mentioned, there are many things happening, many positive signs here and interest. In real estate in Vietnam, the big changes really happened in 2015. In 2015, there was the law of enterprise, which basically meant that as a foreign investor, you don't need to anymore have a joint venture with a local partner. You can control and come in here and look and own products going forward. And also in that year was where, in terms of real estate, where foreigners have the right, in certain circumstances, to own real estate property. Basically, it's Vietnam's way of attracting foreign investment and needing foreign investment to move things forward and to have confidence of that and opening up the market for retails and brands and other things where the consumer basis wants that and demands that. Vietnam, in terms of retail, it's worth mentioning, but food and beverage, grocery shopping and food and beverage, in terms of retail, makes up about 44% of the market. Electronics, 17%, apparel, 5%, and home and gardens, about 11% in terms of, but food and beverage and entertainment and being social, going out there is the key driver in terms of Vietnam and retail. So in terms of retail in Vietnam, when we look at this, basically, obviously, the major cities are Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi in terms of what we're doing. And whilst it varies in terms of rental price and retail price, in Vietnam, obviously, it's in square meters. In other countries, maybe square feet is the calculation. Rental terms are normally done on a monthly basis. But you can look at rental rates mainly in the CBD of about $115 per square meter per month. Obviously, this depends whether you're in a shopping center or whether you're on a high street store. A non-CBD average rental price is looking at about $25 a month. Again, it's very site specific. It's also specific on the amount of square meters that you have. But these are general retail for clothing outlets and brands, and in terms of units that are around. Clearly, if you're in a very high fashion brand, maybe your Dior or other kind of brands like that, you want to be on the main high street, and then the price is a lot higher, maybe about $250 or $300. But generally, if you're in a coffee shop, maybe it goes down to $40, $50. So $40 or $30. So don't be scared about the price. It's very site specific in terms of what you're doing. The same goes with Hanoi. Hanoi, the prices are generally about 10% lower than Ho Chi Minh City. But actually the spending can be in some markets and food and beverage a little bit higher as well. But obviously it's a smaller urbanized area, less income generally by people. So let's talk about some future supply. Now, I put some things down here just to highlight what's coming in the area. A lot of these are mall-based rather than your high street store. But it just goes, what I want to show here is some of the products that are planning and coming onto the market. And also the size and the square meters of what they're doing. Now, new urban areas are growing all the time. You can see this in Ho Chi Minh City, in around the District 2 area, which only 5 years ago was greenfield site. Now it's urban planned, they're putting in roadways, they're building massive amounts of development and apartments. And so there's a demand driver for people to move into these areas. And there's a retail and food and beverage that needs to supply that demand. In terms of the population and the family unit and makeup in Vietnam, you know, only 20 years ago, it would be a townhouse structure with 3 generations living under one roof. But now a lot of the 50% of the population being under 35, and the average age to be married and start a family is about 24. A lot of people are living in apartments, and a lot of people want convenience, and they want to have food and beverage around near them or entertainment facilities. The traditional shopping mall, we hear a very famous brand called Parkson that have now left, where you have, as I mentioned previously, jewelry stores on the ground floor, followed by fashion brands, followed by an entertainment unit on the top. It is now fairly obsolete. You know, we're looking at shopping centers where there is good food and beverage, there is a choice, there is good Asian brands for food. You know, there is an entertainment areas, and it's really a lifestyle pulling people in. And so for real estate, when I'm consulting to big developers about the tenant mix of their shopping malls or where they should be located, and we're doing research, a lot of them are pulling in factors where they need good food and beverage, because that is the, you know, as I said, the most important part of retail, the most successful part of retail here in Vietnam. And a lot of them about entertainment and experience, which I'll talk about later. So as you can see here, just a quick look at a lot of these that are being developed are developed internally by Vietnamese rather than the international brands. But that's not to say that the international brands aren't expanding rapidly here. You can see this in Aeon Mall, where Aeon, for example, they want to have 20 units by the end of the next 5 years, 20 big department stores. As you can see here in Hanoi, it's a very similar story, where there's a lot more brands that are coming on that are just domestic. Vin Group is developing lots of stores there, but in Hanoi, you can see that a lot of the international players here, mainly the big investors, are from Japan and Korea, or Singapore, which is sometimes Singaporean money, but sometimes money coming via China. So a lot of the brands want to be relocated here to push out brand identity and customer loyalty. So because the population is here, consumer spending and social demographics reflect the demand that is here. So moving on here, just briefly looking at some retail patterns. Now, omni-channel and e-commerce, I won't spend too much time on this, but you can basically see that these are changing the demand and the way that people buy products here. Omni-channel is basically looking at seamless and digital online and physical in-store engagement, and making sure that it's a seamless interaction for consumers. And a lot of people are looking at omni-channel and e-commerce, especially after COVID, and adapting to that, taking advantage of convenience for the customer. Now, the other thing to also talk about, which is something that is growing in Vietnam. Still, as was mentioned in the previous talk, Vietnam is very much looking at sort of a wet market culture, cash payments being made, but this is increasingly changing with Momo, with other payments online, consumer credit, financing. Aon, Lotte, for example, have just released new ways to pay on credit for their premises. Vin Group have apps to look at their stores and how you pay on there. Bank transfers happening a lot easier in terms of using mobile shopping, cash on delivery. So I think this will increase with customers, and looking at food and beverage outlets and things like that, people need to make sure they look at technology so that when people do enter their store, they can have benefits or discounts or loyalty cards or payments online. And omni-channel is looking the way to engage in consumer spending. And Vietnam, having a very smart, tech-savvy population, this is something that should really be looked at for anybody that's coming in and growing their business in Vietnam. So looking at consumer behavior, now when we're doing retail consulting, we look at the breakdown of consumer spending. We look at the different types of people that will engage in terms of the different uses of food and beverage and things like that. Now we break this down, but to be honest, to succeed and embrace the key trends, because consumers are increasingly loyal to brands, especially those that understand the local adaptation and flavor. John in the last talk, mentioned about loyalty and him targeting to the Vietnamese audience. I think this is extremely key here in Vietnam and engaging with them. There's a change in the modern retail formats of the way that people are shopping. There's a wave of consolidation, as I mentioned, between different groups like Vin Group and Masan and all these people that are coming together to grow. There's increased competition with brands coming in and new awareness. And with competition, it means that consumers are requiring better services and better structure and better engagement online. So the idea is to reach Vietnam's consumers and win loyalty. In a competitive market like Vietnam, it is necessary eventually for scale to get loyalty and to make sure that people understand the product and what you're doing. And in order to shape compelling value propositions and honing trustworthy brands and drive innovation across omni-channel platforms, it also needs to be backed up by robust operations and relevant local knowledge. Is key. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, looking at some of the brands that are coming in and what they're doing here, the consumer wants to adapt. The consumer wants to understand the better brands. There is a high demand here. As I mentioned before, it was only 10 years ago that there was no Starbucks or no McDonald's mentioned. And in fact, if I mentioned them, people would say they would never come to Vietnam. Now there's a growth of brands coming in every day, from Uniqlo, last couple of years, to other products coming in. And there's a demand for them, and there's a requirement for convenience and buying. So what are we looking at here in terms of the food and beverage market landscape? Vietnam has a very high population density. There are lots of brands. Some of the key brands are obviously Asian fusion brands that are coming in, and that's why I think there is a high demand for Japanese sushi. There's a high demand here for other Asian food, and that's why a lot of the brands that are presented here at Macam with Singapore, I think, will automatically feel close to the consumer bases here. So let's look at some of the landscape here. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, we're talking about the big shopping centers. A lot of the brands, I think, in terms of entry, they want they want a good location, they want good footfall, they want people to look at them growing their business. And so a lot of businesses, when they choose to enter the market, they move into shopping centers and department stores and areas like that, where they can be affiliated with other brands and there is a customer awareness of what's going on. And I think that's fairly typical, with later on when they're growing out and spreading out into the local area, maybe okay, but people want their first store to be a landmark store. I don't think that's unusual, and that hasn't changed in recent years. The one thing to note, though, about setting up in a department store or consumer center is obviously online ordering, the benefits of that, and how you proceed with that. A lot of the bigger chains here have opened up on stores, but then they have secondary units that do deliveries separately outside in factories and warehouses. So looking at international food and beverage options, branding and brand recognition is important. Most people want to be located where a younger population that spend money on food and beverage, that have more disposable income. Many of the people here have traveled in the region and understand Singapore and the Singaporean market and the food. You can see this in the way that people talk about Singaporean crab, for example, here, that a lot of people is a luxury item and they'll travel to spend money on. And again, the flagship stores are normally in Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Da Nang, but it is also worth considering surrounding areas where there's a high population and maybe less competition, such as Kampur or Binh Hoa in the south. So it's worth considering what else is out there and what local market drivers might be. And so, depending on the concept, there's a few specific locations that should be given priority or attention. I've just listed some out here. A lot of people go to them. In terms of units here in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. Basically, if you're looking at a shopping mall concept, probably about 25% of every shopping mall is food and beverage. Looking at that, and that's the demand. So in Vincom in Ho Chi Minh City, for example, there's 2 floors, 4,000 square meters each, 8,000 square meters of food and beverage. And it's very common that the food and beverage is located on one floor, obviously because of the way that the M&E, mechanical engineering and drainage things work, but it's also to get a good cluster because people like the activity of those areas. So let's have a quick discussion on retail malls. A lot of the malls, as I mentioned earlier on, have changed. They're becoming more in terms of the experience, a community mall where people can come together with their families and have activities, but also have food and beverage. We're looking at digitalization, tracking the consumers, where they're coming, what they're looking at, making sure that you have brand recognition and loyalty. And we're looking at a shopping experience. Basically, it's got to be a place to be seen and come and have activity where they can have elements of their own time. It's more an environment where people can do browsing, excuse me, rather than shopping, and focus on the experience as a whole. So that was a very quick presentation, and I appreciate your time before we go into lunch area. I'm open to questions, but just to kind of wrap the whole thing up, is this the time to look at Vietnam? Vietnam is honestly the rising star of Southeast Asia. The demand's here, the consumer base is here. When do you want to enter Vietnam? My simple turn on that question is now. Take advantage of the opportunity because Vietnam is an exciting place with amazing people, great culture, and the business opportunity and success is amazing.
Thank you so much, David, for your presentation. I do have a follow-up for you. I believe Colliers has done some work with mall footprint mix before as well. And we're curious to hear your views in terms of how have you seen the mall landscape evolve in Vietnam over the last few years to a point where they're driving traffic as well?
Yeah, sure. So I guess obviously with technology, everything's changing the way that people interact in terms of business and retail. In terms of shopping malls, this is not exempt from that. People want to go for an experience. They want that Instagrammable moment. They want to engage in the retail. They want to be shown with the brands. You can see this when Starbucks entered the market, for example, lots of people queuing up around the corner to get taken a picture with a cup of coffee in their hand. And I think that all these new brands are coming in that have a similar attraction because people want new brands. When you're looking at in Ho Chi Minh City, for example, Saigon Center, Takashimaya entered the market a few years ago. Now, when they entered the market, there was 40% new brands that came in there that had never been in Vietnam before. And so people travel there. It's very exciting. These new brands, because they're landmark stores, they invest a lot of capital expenditure on their outlets to make them a place to be seen and to travel a destination. I think the shopping mall of history, which is the sort of Parkson Mall, which is sort of 4 floors, basically leased as an afterthought to the developer, where they have a jewelry store on the ground floor, fashion, followed by entertainment area. I think that is a long time dead in this market. It's an adaptable, smart population here, and they require engagement of the similar kind of from retailers.
Okay, thank you for sharing. It seems quite consistent with the overall theme of the rest of the panel discussions, where the need for a good experience seems to be standing out amongst the consumers as well in Vietnam. All right, with that, we come to the end of our first Franchise 101 session. Thank you so much once again, David, for taking the time out.